Coming up now, we've got a fireside chat about OpenRAN. Our speakers today are Manish Pathak from the industry, an industry leader and on 5G and OpenRAN transformation from IBM. Currently working as an associate partner and industry leader in the network and OSS transformation practice in the global telecommunications and media industry at IBM. This capacity focuses on network cloudification, 5G and OpenRAN system integration, orchestration and automation. Prior to his current role at IBM, he held leadership roles in Alcatel, Genband and Cognizant. Joining him on stage will be Stephen Douglas, Head of Marketing Strategy at Spirent Communications. Stephen heads the marketing strategy for the organization, developing Spirent strategy, this is very badly written, helping to define market positioning, future growth opportunities, new innovative solutions, and market-leading disruptive technologies. Stephen also leads Spirent's strategic initiatives to 5G and future networks, and represents Spirent on a number of industry and government advisory boards. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you please welcome to the stage Manish and Stephen, please.
That's really Fireside closest to you? Okay.
I just stare at you all. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. Okay. So let's just begin by essentially just explaining exactly what OpenRAN is, what more needs to be done to get the best possible service and coverage using it. So that's the question for Stephen to open.
Yeah, great question. I mean, let me ask anybody in the room, does anybody know what OpenRAN is? Well, there's one, fantastic. There's a couple. So, is that okay? Yeah. So our radio networks today that make up, as we're rolling out 5G, for example, historically, over the last number of years, there's been massive consolidation in the industry where there's only a number of big suppliers left really providing that. And that's good in one regard because you've got companies like Nokia and Ericsson, the big Chinese incumbent, Huawei, and they've got some phenomenal technology. But it raised concerns within the industry, both from the Vodafones, British Telecoms of the world, that they wanted more diversity in that supply chain. They wanted new innovative players coming into it. And government also started to get worried about this as well, because we've now issues with using some of the Chinese suppliers. So for example, Huawei is no longer allowed in the UK markets. And that shrinks the pool as well. So there's only now a few suppliers left. So the whole concept with OpenRAN was to look at a methodology of where we could stimulate and diversify the radio supply chain within the cellular communications industry. And a big challenge with the radio is that it's pretty much proprietary. So one of the big concepts was that if you could break that proprietary lock by making open interfaces, open APIs, you could stimulate new suppliers to come into it, younger suppliers, more innovative, potentially technology suppliers coming into the ecosystem. So it's a grand ambition. Of course, the challenge is it's got to deliver at some point on that. And obviously, it's very much in its infancy today.
Thank you, Stephen. Would you like to add anything before I ask the next question?
Yeah, no, I think, I hope it's working, yeah. So I think I do agree with everything that Stephen said. And just one extra point is that I believe the 5G and OpenRAN, especially OpenRAN, it's giving us an opportunity to shape up the enterprise architecture in the way on the telco side, which they were never shaped up in the last 20, 30 years, because we were always restricted by a proprietary closed box ecosystem, and then all the organizational processes, organizational models, and the technology evolution was linked with that. Now, this is one chance where we can really make the microservices and API-driven architectures a reality for telco, because if you remember in 2006, we had SOA, and we were failed to SOA because of this same problem. And now I see it as a great opportunity to transform the whole enterprise architecture landscape for the telcos.
Just follow up on that. I think that's a very valid point, because one of the opportunities, say, 5G is trying to do is to move beyond just being a consumer technology, which is just servicing you and I. Its ambition is to be sort of fundamentally part of industry enterprises to use that. And of course, the challenge with that is if you're building out a macro radio network today, like what our big telcos do, it's designed more around giving us that national coverage. It's not designed with the flexibility or agility in mind to go into, say, a factory environment, to go out on a farm. And this is a huge opportunity because when you move to this type of new architecture, this new type of cloud native, this new type of open architecture, you can potentially create a more lightweight, flexible types of radio that could be deployed more cost efficiently, more agilely into these types of environments and start to open up that market. And I think that's one of the huge desires a lot of people are thinking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just moving on to the question for Manish here. So, whose responsibility is it to ensure the interoperability of open RAN systems? Should there be full cooperation between service providers, or is there a benefit to there being some competition?
Very interesting question, and I'm part of the TIP group where I'm working with various industry partners, and IBM and Spirent, we are working very closely on this topic. So I believe the responsibility here is in the three folds. Number one, all the technology vendors who need to produce these Open RAN systems, they have to show a commitment of following the common standards. It should not become another story where the industry has given the INAP and every technology provider build their own INAP version of the INAP, right? So I think this is the first responsibilities of the technology vendors for interoperability. Second, all the telcos, they need to commit that they're going to follow the similar guidelines to certify these interoperable systems. Because if, just imagine if tomorrow, and I'm taking some examples just for the namesake, let's say Vodafone or Telefonica or Orange or Bharti or AT&T, they all started defining their own standards, how they want to certify their systems, then it's never achievable journey for the SIs. And then third, most important, I believe, is the SIs who need to lead the interoperability, along with the end-to-end automated testing, like, for example, what we are doing together in the industry. So I think it's an ecosystem responsible for that, but in the end, the SIs who need to stitch it together.
Anything to add, Stephen, at all?
I think that's absolutely a valid point on it. It's, we're, at the end of the day, we're moving to as I call it, the Lego effect in the radio, where you can pick up different Lego blocks and stick them together and make it work. And of course, that sounds great, but you've got to make sure that they actually do work together. So the interoperability becomes sort of massively critical about it. It also becomes part of the blame game culture. If something does go wrong later on, who is at fault there? And as Manish said there, what probably stepping into the mix here is the role of the system integrators. I think they've got a huge role now to play in this because they are the neutral party that can come and help these different vendors collaborate to allow those sort of Lego building blocks to work. And a big sort of, I was going to say, the secondary challenge of that is how do you continuously make sure that works through the lifetime of that there multiple different products? Because obviously different vendors are going to have different release cycles over the coming years or months. And you're going to have to continuously look at how do you continuously revalidate that interoperability all of the time. Now, IT systems have been very good at this for years. Telco hasn't, because it's only usually needed to go to one supplier who provided sort of a monolithic solution. Now we're moving into a world where they need these new types of IT paradigms where automation, continuous revalidation, orchestration are all going to be sort of pivotal if they're really going to be able to exploit this.
Just in terms of further exploiting it and the infrastructure, can you just talk about the possibility through partnerships?
Yeah, I think partnerships is it's the ecosystem is the critical part here. As I said, one of OpenRAN's big ambitions is vendor diversity. And vendor diversity tells you that then you want to stimulate more than 3 or 4 suppliers. You want to have hundreds of suppliers who are maybe only providing constituent parts of it. And that means you need ecosystems and you need partnerships to allow that to work together. Where actually the competition isn't the more historic competition that we think of today, where one supplier is competing head to head with the other on a complete end-to-end system. Now we're thinking about what is the best for the actual end customer. What does that service provider actually need? How do we make them collaborate together? And this is where the partnership role becomes really, really important. And you're seeing a breadth of ecosystems being developed today across the globe. Some are through the standards bodies, some are with government backing as well at the moment. So there's, for example, here in the UK, there's a government initiative called SONIC, which is an open interoperability lab, which has been built to try to bring in different partners in the ecosystem to help them work together. And as I said, you also need that role of the system integrators coming into it as well. You know, that sort of neutral governance role, who's not taking any side, and that's, I think, a critical part of it.
So the government very much at the center of bringing everyone together.
I think they're having a big role in it, because I think they've realized that if you don't diversify the supply chain, the risk is, you only have a few major suppliers of, say, your radio equipment. If radio is a critical part of not only our consumer networks, but it's now in our big enterprises, then it becomes a national risk. And that means government have to take a role to either try to stimulate the ecosystem itself, which they are trying to do, and also try to look to offset some of the cost. I mean, if you put this all on the service providers like a Vodafone and British Telecom, you might argue, okay, that's fair, but why would they want to do that? They can still go and pick, one or two vendors they've got. So helping them offset some of the cost becomes, I think, really important.
Is there anything more that the government can do in regards to that they aren't doing currently?
No, I think governments definitely need to put their foot forward, as Stephen said. But I do believe that there is a technological evolution that need to happen to solve this infrastructure problem, right? Because if I take a one level deeper onto the technology side, today we have Kubernetes, and every CNF and VNF vendor is saying they comply to the Kubernetes, but it's really not the open Kubernetes. So if you have a company and you certified your 5G core containers on a Kubernetes A platform, the moment I swap the infrastructure below from one party to A party to B party, suddenly your CNF doesn't work. It has to again go through the testing. So I think infrastructure is the biggest cost, and to mitigate that cost, the way the compute has been seen today and the way compute has been consumed by the technology, that has to evolve. So for example, if I'm the SI and if I have certified your containers on A platform, I should have confidence that it will work on the B platform with the minimal testing. So technology has to evolve there as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess this question is very much just sort of half answered it anyway. But in terms of the biggest challenges for Open RAN service providers and the mobile industry, sort of what are the challenges are out there?
I think so. Challenge is obviously the biggest challenge everybody is seeing. The way the Open RAN has been started, everybody thought we're going to have a vendor neutral system and cost effective. The reality was opposite. It came out very costly system in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the interoperability testing. In the beginning, everybody thought, okay, we don't have to do much testing because it's open ecosystem. Now the reality is the industry agrees that the 60% of the total effort is the testing. Now, how do we do it effectively? By automation, by solving these end-to-end supply chain problems, by sorting out the technology interoperability problem. But more importantly, is the CSP's organization structure and their process models. Are they ready to consume these cloud-ready networks? So if you have a NOC, and if NOC do not understand how to monitor the KPIs of a cloud-native network, then the whole ecosystem will not work. So I think the biggest challenge is obviously we need to solve the cost problem. We need to find a sustainable, automated interoperability testing problem. And third, the organizational models and processes need to be evolved to support the cloud-native networks.
Okay. And are there particular parts of the regions of the world where who are the market leaders in this field at the moment? For Stephen or Manish, who would like to?
Well, I mean, to be fair, actually, Europe is probably one of the early adopters or drivers behind it. You have major operators like Vodafone, Telefonica, Orange are fundamentally not only backing it but driving it. So they're starting that process off. But you are seeing in other markets, like for Japan, there's a new operator there called Rakuten, who's building their network with it. Dish Networks is a new supplier in North America. It's building its network around it. So you're starting to see these early adoption. It is still early, and I mean, a lot of that early focus is deploying it in what I would call safer environments. So rolling it out into, say, rural communities where there's less risk because there's less population. So the radio doesn't need to be as performant maybe as it would have to be if it was deployed, say, in downtown London. You're seeing it also being looked at also in the factory or small environments as well. Again, because it's a slightly smaller, safer environment for it. And these are becoming sort of learning exercises for how the technology can be used. But I think, as Manish said, it's not just about making sure the technology works. If the wrapper around that, the operational processes aren't in place by the service providers, how to maintain it, manage it, deploy it, then that becomes a sort of an inflated cost, which actually becomes a barrier to entry. And that's why they're starting to look at how do they automate that, How do they bring in things like continuous processes, whether that's continuous testing and revalidation of it, because they are going to see a lot of changes over time. And also you've got to remember a lot of these suppliers are nascent, they're new. They don't come with that heritage where maybe, you know, a British Telecom's worked with them for 20 years and they're comfortable with what they get from them. So at that time they're taking these newer vendors in, they're maybe having to think about, that's a heightened risk, so I need to take more care about that. So I would say this early stage is about them learning about, you know, the technology, but also the operational environment that they're needing or going to need to put in place. And that's, you know, as Manish said, you see things like automation, continuous testing being a critical part of that to help them sort of A, deliver on that, but B, keep the cost down. Because otherwise, if you inflate the cost of this, why would anybody decide to move?
Yeah. Also on the market leadership part, right? I think I generally believe, looking at working with so many operators globally, there are two type of things in the thought leadership, right? So one is the thought leadership at the strategy and the vision level. And definitely, I mean, we have a lot of telcos in Europe who are leading that, right? For example, Vodafone, Telefonica, Deutsche Telekom. If you go to Asia Pac, you have Bharti and other players who are leading that. If you go to US, you have AT&T and Dish and Verizon leading it. But that's all at the vision and the strategy level. When it comes to the execution of that, I see there is a two type of challenge in the industry. One is those who are already well-established telcos in the market, their situation is the hybrid network. They are not the cloud-native networks, and they have a legacy to carry with them. So their OpenRAN and 5G networks will become the hybrid network, and the way they have to implement this to bring the leadership, they have to think about a hybrid network rollout strategy, where they need to have the 5G non-standalone cores, and they have to coexist with what they have today. Whereas the operators like Rakuten and Dish, who are cloud native from the day one, they will have an easier journey to start with on the OpenRAN and 5G, because their processes, their models, their technology stack, everything is already cloud native. So there are two type of evolutions need to happen, and that will define two different type of journeys for the next few years. If you look at OpenRAN, it started all a couple of years back. We had ideation stage, we have strategy stage, we have inception stage. Right now, I believe personally, this is in the consolidation stage. So now everybody has realized what they have to do, what challenges they will face, and now people have started working together. And in the next couple of months, the consolidation will happen, and then the rollout and the adoption will start happening in the 2023. Because then everybody knows the answer, what is the per site cost of the rollout, what I do have to do for automation, what are the best platforms to select, right? So this will go through a little bit of journey, and in the next 6 months, everybody will have a fair idea. If I have to roll out OpenRAN, do I need 100 million, or do I need 300 million, or I need more than that, right?
So just in regards to your individual roles, and also what you'd like to get out of today, and the types of people you'd like to meet, and obviously you can take it in turns because you may have different aims, of course, but who are the kind of people that you'd like to engage with today in terms of, and what are you looking to sort of get out of this experience at the event today?
I think, yeah, that's a very interesting question, because I would like to meet the people who are at the business level, who really believe that this is how they need to make it happen. Because there is one thing I haven't heard so far in the industry, how the business is going to make money out of the 5G and OpenRAN. That's the big question, right? It should not become another IoT where everybody implemented. It should not become another big data where we all invested in the machine learning models and the monetization models, but the money never came, right? Money only went to the cloud native companies, like who were the cloud born companies, right? That's one. Second, I also want to see the perspective of, from a media perspective, what the people are expecting out of it. Because you as a consumer, for you it doesn't matter whether it's 4G or 5G, it all depends on your requirements. So I believe the 5G will start giving money to the telcos and the industry from a B2B market, not directly from the B2B. And then the B2B need to create their B2C use cases, right? For example, smart manufacturing, smart healthcare, connected cars. So I want to meet the people at the business level and the consumer level, what's their expectation, so that as a system integrator and technology company, we can try to bridge that gap and make it a reality for the telcos.
Yeah, because it may not always be obvious to people what IBM's role would be in this ecosystem. So it's great, I think, to explain it. Stephen, from your perspective, what's an ideal outcome for you for this event, and also sort of any events you're attending? What's the message that you're kind of looking to spread?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. Obviously, the technology ecosystem is important on meeting the breadth of that. But I'm also, I mean, one of the areas that always interests me, when we're speaking about these new technologies is sort of the entrepreneur community as well, because the ambition of OpenRAN within the telecom sector is to stimulate a new breed of suppliers, and it needs those new companies coming into the mix. And there's many technologists at the moment probably don't think of the telecom sector as their first choice when they're coming in. They're maybe thinking towards enterprise, they're maybe thinking of a lot of other areas. And OpenRAN actually is a really interesting area because it's bringing sort of cloudification, softwareization capabilities into the traditional telco world. And I think we want to look to see if we can help stimulate those types of young companies that are thinking about coming into it. And I think there's also an opportunity here for looking also at the intersection point with other technologies. So a big part of the future radio networks that we're all talking about, and you heard a speaker talk about earlier on about 5G and Wi-Fi convergence, is other technologies like artificial intelligence, which is going to be a key pivotal part of the future radio networks to make them how they can self-adapt, self-heal, self-manage, self-optimize themselves. So we need to start exploring how we can actually bring in those other types of technologies and those other skill sets into the broader ecosystem. I mean, you asked that question about what else would I ask for government? Well, the first thing would be skill sets and training. We've got a lot of good radio engineers. The IT world's got a lot of good, say, security or cloud engineers, but we don't have those combinations of skills that are actually now needed for the telecom industry, where we need people who understand how radio networks work, how cloud is deployed, how IT systems operate, how security operates. And that's, I think, a role where government could come in and look at what the education sort of facilities should be focusing on. And that's sort of another sort of part of hopefully what you're trying to sort of have in these conversations today, because OpenRAN is a very infant technology. And if we can spread the word more about it, we can maybe attract more people to think about this is maybe where their companies could focus maybe their R&D towards or get involved with.
Yeah, make it more of a collective effort. Are there any questions from the audience at all? Yes, let's bring the microphone. I'll scoot down. It's all right.
Hi. I think, Manish, you mentioned about this hybrid networks today, and the networks are getting more and more complicated. Different vendors in the network and different technologies, 2G to 5G and SA, NSA, all those things. And on top of this, now we are talking about OpenRAN with multiple vendors, potentially, may or may not. So how are we going to manage those networks as an operational point of view? Everything cannot be done manually. What is your view on automation of those networks?
Brilliant question, and thank you for asking that. I've spent last 3 years working on this topic, right? And if you look at the network situation today, our network, I personally define it as a static network situation, where you had a vendor who provided everything and they used to give you everything up and running, working, factory tested, right? You don't have to worry. If it's a 4G core, it will work, right? You don't have to worry about it. All you have to do, you have to put an operational layer on top of it, which will do the monitoring and then support the business. Now it's changing. You will have at least 7 to 8 vendors who will make the 5G core readily available. So the first part comes is the vendor governance. How this consolidated vendor governance will work. And it's not just at the program management or delivery management level. I'll give you an example. If a 5G core CNF vendor is going to release the new upgrades every 3 months or 6 months, how will you make sure that the test cases coming from those, I'm sorry to getting a little bit technical, let's say the YAML files and the heat templates on that, how are you going to automatically generate the test cases out of it, right? And then once they are generated, how they goes into the continuous testing pipelines onto the network side. And once they are tested, how your orchestrators are going to automatically deploy and manage the service lifecycle on the production side. And tomorrow, if you have a problem with a 5G slice, and when the event comes that the slice is not performing correctly, how it will flow back into a continuous integration pipeline where the development team can fix those problems and they automatically get tested and automatically get deployed. So the way I envision this is end-to-end automation, starting from setting up a factory which will certify these releases and make them available. Then the integration at the execution level where the test automation tools need to test it automatically. And then you need to have the orchestrators at the 2 layers, one at the domain level where they have to configure like the RICs and in the SD-WAN domain and different domains, and they need to have the service lifecycle management orchestrations running on top of it. And they all need to integrate together through 3 simple pipelines on a telco side: CI pipeline, CT pipeline, and CD pipeline, continuous delivery pipeline. And the integrations need to happen at that level, and they need to talk at the API level. So everybody need to embrace something like a Kamara project, where you have open API integration and everybody talks the same language.
Would you like to add anything else, or is your question answered? Yeah, very, very, very thorough answer. Anyone else got a question at all? Stuart.
It just reverts back to the education and conversation on government. Completely agree. It's needed. I think it's needed in a lot of different industries and a lot of different areas, this one being obviously a very important one. Just wondered what each of your individual businesses, so IBM and Spirent Communications, are maybe doing, if at all, and I'm sure there's programs in the works, but whether that be recruiting, training, transferable skills internally, because we could wait for the government, but let's be honest, like we could be waiting. So is there anything that IBM are doing and equally Spirent? Stephen?
Go ahead, start.
Yes, so from a Spirent perspective, I mean, we have a number of STEM initiatives that are enabled globally at the moment. We work quite a lot with universities, is where we probably started with at the beginning, to, first of all, to bring a lot of our technology into the universities so they could utilize them, so that students could get hands-on, learn about the types of skill sets they were going to need. But more and more we're starting to focus going back a stage out of into sort of secondary education now as well, to try to start to, I would say, more tempt people into this career path as well at the earlier stages of it, because telco probably isn't seen as one of the sexy industries anymore as it used to be. Yet the UK used to be a leader in it 20 years ago, and yet it's the cutting edge of, you know, fundamentally for the next generation of connectivity as we even move on to the 6G systems in the next decade. So there's a big sort of focus around that. I think what we struggle with, though, at the moment, and it's not a Spirent or I don't think an IBM issue in this, is helping the universities get the funding that they require to actually then start to specialise on that. And that's something where government could I think needs to have more of a role or a policy role around to allow them to do that.
Yeah. No, I do share the similar opinion, because if you refer back to the education, right, even at the higher levels, it is still not at the level where somebody coming out of the college or university, they really understand what they have to do in their first job. So then the responsibility comes with the companies like us to say, let's train the people. And we are committed. We have a lot of programs where we hire the graduates and we train them and we make them really ready for this, right? And they're they're very, very bright chaps, right? But they need some coaching and guidance. Also, there is another initiative that we have started on our side long back, is making the technology adoption easy for the people, whether it's a young comer in the industry or whether it's a 20-year-old experienced guy from the network side. Because sometimes the fear of the adoption do not allow people to have that journey. So if I say DevOps for networks, that scares everybody, because everybody do not have the radio knowledge, everybody do not have the network specific knowledge. And then I cannot expect just a DevOps engineer or agile scrum master to come and say, deliver an OpenRAN project. So we are working on our side simplifying that. We are building up the automation in a way that it's easy for everybody to adopt and accommodate it. And our vision, this is my personal vision, is that in the next 3 years' time, it will become as easy as delivering a BSS project or CRM project or a billing project, right? Because then you will have a specific pocket of the specific expertise, let's say radio expertise or something that will come from that particular domain. But then rest everything, system integrator and everything will be so easy to adopt that people will naturally start going towards that. It will no longer be a specific domain, it will become a domain which everybody can play together. And I do genuinely believe the 5G gives us that opportunity to transform our telco industry in that way. We didn't have that so far. People were like so much experienced on a particular Perl scripting or shell scripting or a particular Corba that we were not getting that opportunity. Now we have that. And I think it's a joint responsibility of all of us. And yes, government need to introduce those things in the curriculum. When the people comes out, they are easily able to adopt to it.
I mean, just to add to that, it's just something that I had a conversation with government last week about, was there's even a broader opportunity to extend outside to the ecosystems that supply the telco environments. So for example, in the silicon and chipset manufacturing sectors as well, there's a huge potential opportunity. 5G needs pretty much advanced chipsets. OpenRAN, for example, the technology we're talking about, can't best optimize traditional silicon. So there's a lot of sort of focus at the moment. How do we develop new skill sets, new capabilities around chip design, the materials, the metamaterials that are going to be used on that? And although that's a large percentage of that you would say is scientific type of work, there's also the manufacturing side of it. So we can also look at upskilling traditional manufacturing and actually utilizing that to actually be the manufacturing capabilities for the new sort of fabs of the future. And these are roles, I think, and opportunities that we should be focusing at, because if we don't actually stimulate the supply ecosystem as well, we can have the best conceptual architectures in the world, but we discovered with the sort of the chipset shortage we've all seen in the last few years, it can actually be a massive impact in slowing down the rollout of technology.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think we've probably just run out of time now. But in terms of like next steps, if people are there committees, organisations that people could tap into if they want to kind of be part of the conversation? Where would people go from here? Do they go to IBM's website? Where do they go?
Very interesting, because as I said, we are in a consolidation phase, right? So, for example, if you are a telco and you have built an OpenRAN lab, that's still secret to yourself, right? So a lot of those findings, learnings are not publicly available yet because there is still need to mature. There's a lot of documentation online, and if you go to IBM website, we keep publishing these things. We have recently announced a lot of partnerships, and the material from those partnerships, the joint white papers, etc., is available. But I think it's also a little bit of that adoption curve that the industry need to go. So if you want to move from media into OpenRAN, you need to have an easy path to move towards that. And I think those educational material are available, but I think they will become more easy to consume and digest in next couple of months' time when the consolidation phase is over, because then you will have a lot of things. And there are a lot of videos available. If you go to our website, they're available. But I think they are videos, right? Unless you get a hands-on rich experience. So we have set up a center of excellence in Madrid, where we are actually now taking the young graduates and the young people from the market, putting them along with the experienced people from the industry, somebody with a 20+ years radio knowledge. We are helping them to learn how to do the testing. We are also working jointly, IBM and Spirent, on several places where we are trying to make this a reality and helping the people within the company and outside to move towards this OpenRAN space.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.